Hello everyone, welcome to Versus MTG. Today we are playing Gruul Midrange in Modern, and we are going to start with a quick deck check. If you have already seen this, you can skip it and go directly to the gameplay. As a mid-range deck, we are trying to play, for the most part, fair magic. This means that our cards don't have weird interactions, and we also interact with our opponent and try to win by using efficient and good cards. There are other mid-range decks in the format that try to do the same thing, but what stands out for Gruul Midrange is his 1-drops. Here we have Arbor Elf that can untap forest, Utopia Sprawl that let us choose a color to then enchant a forest that now is able to produce 1 green mana and 1 of the chosen color. And finally, Birds of Paradise that can tap for any color. What we are trying to do here is to ramp our mana curve so we are able to have access to 3 or possibly 4 mana on turn 2. Typically, the higher the cost of a card, the better it should be. And what we are trying to do here is to cast better cards than our opponent before they have access to the equally good cards. There is a nice interaction between Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl, because Arbor Elf can untap any forest and Utopia Sprawl must enchant a forest. What we end up with is a pair of cards that together are able to produce 4 mana on turn 2. But what are the efficient and good cards that we are trying to get by getting more mana? I divided them into 2 groups. First are the cards that let us have card advantage, like Seasoned Pyromancer, let us discard 2 to then draw 2. The good thing about this card is that let us get rid of things that we don't really want in earlier stages of the game, and also let us draw 1 or 2 cards in later stage of the game when we don't have many cards in hand, because he doesn't require for you to have the 2 cards to discard to be able to draw 2 more. But that's not all. This guy also creates 1/1 elementals for each non-land discarded when it enters the battlefield, and you can also pay 5 to red and 3 generic to exile it from the graveyard and create 2 1/1 elementals. This guy is actually pretty great. With ramp, you get potentially 4 power on the board by turn 2 and also get the possibility to fix your hand. Then we have Bloodbraid Elf that was considered so good at one point that had to be banned. Luckily for us, it's not anymore. It's a 3/2 haste creature with Cascade, what means that we get to play another random card with converted mana cost 3 or less for free. We also have Chandra that gives us versatility. We can choose to kill something doing 4 damage or play the top card of our library, and if it's not a land, we get to do 2 damage to our opponent. And also, it's able to generate 2 red mana if we need to cast something. The ultimate let us do 5 damage for every time we cast something, and actually it's not that rare that we get to use it. And finally, we have a new addition to this deck, Elder Gargoyle, that is a 6/6 for 5 that each time he attacks or blocks, we get to choose if we want a 3/3 beast, draw a card, or gain 3 lives. What makes this card great is the same thing that makes Chandra great, the versatility. We have a huge creature that can help us come back from games. The second group of efficient and good cards that I was talking about are first Lightning Bolt, that is just a really good removal. It's versatile, can help us get rid of creatures and planeswalkers. Then we have a relative new addition to this deck, Bonecrusher Giant, that if we get to remove something with his adventure mode, it's like actually drawing an extra card. And finally, Glorybringer, that helps us get rid of creatures, and thanks to his flying and haste abilities, can be a surprise factor that can just make the difference between winning or losing. Then there is another group of cards that are played in this deck that it used to be the main focus, but now has become, in my personal opinion, a support strategy rather than the main goal of the deck. These are the Land Disruption group. We have here Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon that turn all non-basic lands into mountains. And of course, spillage that can either destroy an artifact or a land. The goal of this group is to slow our opponent or directly just make them miserable and not able to play Magic because they can't cast a thing. These are especially strong when we are on the play and get to cast one of these on turn 2. There are various lists of this deck out there, and the number of Blood Moons and Magus of the Moon and Pillage can change. I think it depends on what the player feels is more important at the current meta. Sometimes it's more important to have a blocker or a creature that's able to attack in the form of Magus of the Moon, but because he's a creature with just 2 toughness, it's really easy for most of the decks in the format to get rid of him. But also, if you only play Blood Moons, you will have games in which you draw multiple copies of it, and you probably won't be very happy for that. So it's really up to you to find what's best. And finally, we have our Graveyard Hate group. Of course, we here play 2 Scavenging Ooze that when you read it, it don't really seem too scary, but when you play against it, you get to see its power. It's a 2/2 for 2 that can exile anything from a graveyard by paying 1 green, and when it's a creature, you get to put 1/1/1 counter on it, and also you gain a life. And we are playing 3 copies of Clotis. This card have really impressed me. The 2 damage and 2 life that it gives each turn for exiling a non-land card adds up really fast, and also the possibility to produce mana can make the difference between finding the card that you need with Seasoned Pyromancer and casting that winning Lightning Bolt. We need this card, especially for cards like Euro, Snapcaster Mage, Dredge, Lurrus, Red and 6, Mystic Sanctuary, and actually I could keep going on and on. Having a way of exiling cards from the graveyard in the main, it's a good thing, especially when you have the mana for it. For games to entry, the possibilities that our mana dork will die increases, making us a bit slower, but also for our opponent it's sometimes a choice between letting us have the ramp and just wait the real threat to kill that. We struggle against big creatures because our removal can at most do 4 damage with Chandra and Glorybringer, so we usually need to win before our opponent gets something like Death Shadow on the battlefield. In that case, what we can do is just go wide on the board and chump block a few things, and then attacking in hope that's enough damage to kill them. What we have in our sideboard is first the Graveyard Hate group in the form of Grafdigger's Cage and Relic of Progenitus, and as I mentioned before, there are lots of cards that care about the graveyard at the moment in the format, so it's important to have some sort of Graveyard Hate. I've seen a few lists that play different combinations of these cards, but as always I consider that it's up to you to find the right number because it will always depend on the current meta. Then we have the Life Gaining group, help us against decks that try to kill us fast. Obstinate Bailout can also be good against cards like Liliana of the Veil and Croxa and other discarding effects. Weather of the Storm is especially good against Bliss, Mono Red Prowess and Burn. Then we have the Spells Matter group. The ability of Arasta to create chump blockers is amazing. Also we play 2 copies of Cinderbinds that does 1 damage for each non-creature spell that our opponent casts, and that damage with Clothes and Chandra on the battlefield can really add up. Also, if we are against a heavy artifact deck, we get to destroy 1 of them and make 2 damage. Also, we have Hunger of the Gods that can help clean the board against heavy creature decks like Elves, Blitz, Mono Red Prowess. Also, we need to be very conscious of this because most of our creatures can get destroyed by it, so you need to get the timing right. And 1 copy of Chandra Awakened Inferno that can help us against control, against 1 big creature or 1 planeswalker, and also can help gain the win slowly with her +2 ability. Few final comments. Especially with this deck, there are a lot of variants that you can find, and you may want to consider playing a copy of Questing Beast or maybe Renan 6 in the main. But like I said before, really there is not a perfect form of the deck because the metagame is always changing. And well, that's Gruul Midrange. Now, let's see it in action.